Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, as world powers unanimously agree to renew sanctions on Sudan over the devastating toll 18 months of war have taken on civilians, some rights activists remain concerned that the measures do not go far enough as violations, abuse and even possible war crimes continue. Also, Ghana sees a spike in the number of known suicide attempts. The whole of September is dedicated to raising awareness about mental health and letting those suffering psychological distress know that they're not alone and that there are many who want to help. And AI for Africa. Some of the biggest voices from across the continental and global tech space head to Lagos, the African Silicon Valley, to unpick the potential and players in the continent's artificial intelligence scene. But first, all 15 members of the UN Security Council have voted to renew sanctions on Sudan for another year. This includes asset freezes, travel bans, and an arms embargo in the western region of Darfur. Researchers had recommended that this last restriction be extended throughout the country, but that idea was dropped at the UNSC on Wednesday after opposition from China and Russia. After 18 months of fighting between the Sudanese army and the RSF paramilitary, evidence suggests that modern weaponry continues to be sourced and used against civilians. Olivia Bizot tells us more.
All 15 members of the UN Security Council have voted in favour of renewing the current arms embargo in Sudan's western region of Darfur for another year. Now, after the vote, Sudan was given the opportunity to speak. The UN representative for Sudan is close to the army, and he used the opportunity to denounce the atrocities committed by the paramilitary rapid support forces since the war broke out in April of last year. Now, it is true that the RSF have committed a lot of crimes against humanity since the beginning of the war, but the army isn't exactly innocent either. Both sides have been accused of shelling residential areas and targeting civilians using arms that are foreign-made. Organisations like Human Rights Watch have said that these current sanctions in place in Sudan are not enough. After the vote, the organisation tweeted that this is a missed opportunity. They explained that this arms embargo that's currently in place in Darfur should have been extended across the whole country in order to prevent even more casualties. Since the war broke out last year, countless civilians have been killed, millions of people have been displaced, and millions more are facing famine.
Well, as well as the conservative estimate of 20,000 killed in Sudan, the conflict's created the world's largest displacement crisis and ushered in the spectre of famine in North Darfur. But those working on the front line of these intersecting emergencies fear that there's not enough international understanding of the scope of all these crises. Earlier, I spoke to Barrett Alexander, programme head in Sudan for Mercy Corps, and he told me about his understanding of what people needed most amidst the fighting.
We recently released a report with the Danish Refugee Council and Norwegian Refugee Councils that looked at the impact of the famine, particularly in harder hit areas of IPC Phase 5, which is catastrophic hunger, in Darfur and Kordofan. And what we looked at was trying to get a bit beyond the numbers of the 755,000 people that are in catastrophic hunger. We found that parents were forgoing meals so that their children could eat. Lactating mothers couldn't breastfeed their children because they have nutritional deficits based on skipping meals. We found that some women were engaging in transactional sex to be able to pay for food. And all of this paints a very, very grim picture of what the conflict is doing to the population there. This is why scaling up responses for multi-purpose cash assistance, for support to farmers is incredibly needed at this time.
So what kind of impact do you think that the extension of sanctions as voted by the UNSC on Wednesday will have on the problems that you see as being at the top of the list?
I think the impact remains to be seen. But Mercy Corps supports international efforts through the UN Security Council to essentially put pressure on the warring parties to come to the peace table, to negotiate a ceasefire, to engage in dialogue around ending the conflict, to putting pressure on the parties to stop using hunger as a weapon of this war, and to open up humanitarian access to the largely affected populations, particularly North Darfur, Central South Darfur, the Kordofan regions that are hardest hit by the famine.
And what would you like to see more of in terms of support from the international community in tackling some of the devastation caused by the war?
As you mentioned, the conflict in Sudan has been raging for over 500 days, and yet there's very limited international attention or pressure on the conflict. This is why parties to the conflict continue to feel that they can act with impunity. We need the international actors to step up. Many of them, including European donors, made significant commitments, both financial and political, at the Paris conference earlier this year. We need to see those commitments realized, not just because funding lags for Sudan, but the political pressure that's needed for the protection of civilians, for humanitarian access, for our ability to be able to reach those that are the most vulnerable.
And how have you been reaching those who are the most vulnerable? How do you feel about the work or the impact that you at Mercy Corps have been able to do so far?
We've been able to most recently reach about 114,000 farmers with seeds and tools and training to be able to support them through this current lean season, current planting season, the upcoming winter harvest and planting season as well. And what we need is continued donor support for funding things like that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we will continue to see Sudan as a protracted conflict with limited humanitarian options to be able to dig the population out of the famine hole that they are in.
Barrett Alexander there speaking to me earlier about the impact of the war in Sudan on its civilians. Now, there's relief for travellers relying on East Africa's main airport. A strike at Nairobi's Jomo Kenyatta International was called off after having stranded thousands of passengers earlier on Wednesday as dozens of flights were cancelled and delayed. Now, the Kenyan Ministry of Transport and trade unions did manage to broker an agreement with management of the airport. Workers object to plans to lease JKIA to an Indian firm called Adani for 30 years as part of an investment package. Now, unions want the plans scrapped and say that they will not accept any deal that they deem not to be in their interests. And Ghana's Mental Health Authority says that it has seen a huge jump in the numbers of people trying to take their own lives this year. Most of the victims who succeeded in their attempts have been men. Our correspondent tells us more.
In the first half of 2024, Ghana recorded a total number of 543 attempted suicide cases, out of which 81 were actually completed suicide. To put this in context, the entire of 2023 saw 594 attempted cases, with only about 48 being cases that were actually completed suicides. Ama Ando, not her real name though, is one of such persons. He tells me about the stigma that she's had to endure.
When my mom caught me in the act, she slapped me, and they beat me like after that. And I think some people in our neighborhood had seen their act and had led to several stigma after that. So there's the small girl that wanted to disgrace her mom by killing herself.
Ghana has recently decriminalized attempted suicide and set up a mental health authority to deal with the menace, but not without its own challenges.
Suicide is a major concern in terms of emergencies and problems you have to deal with. And a vast majority of suicides are due to mental health challenges and distress. So it's a big concern to us. Bearing in mind that Ghana is a low-middle income country and 3/4 of all suicides occur in countries like Ghana.
This year, awareness is being raised amongst Ghana's security services, from where we understand the highest numbers of cases are being recorded.
Justice Mighty there for us. And to Nigeria now, where some have dubbed Lagos Africa's Silicon Valley. The country's young, tech-savvy and educated population is prime territory for the tailored development of artificial intelligence. And this hasn't gone unnoticed by global tech leaders, and top voices from across this space have headed over to break down the risks and rewards for AI in Africa. Take a look.
The big wave of AI is global, and many countries on the continent are part of it too. Like this farmer in Ghana, already using the technology to monitor his crops. A great step for the future of science, But Nigeria warns against losing sight on the effect this innovation has on humans.
For us to truly harness artificial intelligence for our collective benefit, we must be deliberate and collaborative in our approach. We must ensure that our digital transformation journey is inclusive, equitable, and human-focused.
The 2024 Pan-African AI Conference in Lagos, often referred to as the Silicon Valley of Africa, is co-hosted by the United States and aims to boost Africa's technological future.
I think the partnership has to begin at the people-to-people level, making sure that the entrepreneurs in Nigeria are connected deeply to the entrepreneurs in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the United States, that our AI researchers are connected at the university level.
AI could boost Africa's economy by $1.2 trillion by 2030, according to a study by PwC, provided the continent has the means to develop and adopt it on a large scale.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now, but thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.